As we kind of get into this, I'm curious. I know recruiting's not your main beat, but like how deep do you get into these recruiting classes and things as you kind of cover Nebraska and the big picture of what where this program's headed?
Well, it's kind of my history. It's kind of my background,
Yeah.
is to go really deep into recruiting, and it's harder now with signing day on December 4th because you're still in season. I mean, if you're a team that is playing this weekend, then recruiting is like it's in the middle of the season. I, hey, look, it's the lifeblood of what every program does. Well, maybe not every program now that we have the transfer portal, but still for Nebraska, recruiting is at the heart of the whole thing. So it's essential to know and have your finger on the pulse of what's going on in that area in order to understand the direction of the program. So yeah, I'm fairly into understanding what's happening out there in the recruiting world.
Mitch, are you surprised just in general that a guy like Cortez Mills is flipping to Nebraska with the change of receiver coach and the offensive schematic change, or do you think that helped make that change for him when it came to boosting Nebraska's offense?
Well, I think it was headed in this direction, and he's been looking at Nebraska for a while, and this flip didn't come out of the blue. It was expected, to be clear, in the last 48 hours or so, and maybe even longer than that if you're inside the Nebraska program. So, I won't say that it's entirely because of Dana Holgorsen, being put in this position for, beyond here in bowl season. And, we're still waiting for certain to see what happens at that receiver coach spot. But obviously he's got that connection with Da'Keel Shorts, who played for Holgorsen at West Virginia, coached for him at Houston, and it would appear that he's on his way to being the Nebraska wide receivers coach. I don't think that part of it, the assistant coach, necessarily factored into this flip. I think it was more about what Cortez Mills saw at Nebraska as a program overall. And then the Holgorsen thing, I do think that was a factor. You want to know the direction that the offense is going and what kind of an offense the team that you're headed to is going to play in your time at that school.
Mitch, speaking of kind of some of the uncertainty, whether it's with the wide receiver coach spot or obviously with Tony White moving on and uncertainty what's going on with that defensive staff, are you surprised at all, kind of from a bigger picture standpoint, that there wasn't more movement? It sounds like Jeremiah Jones won't sign today, but are you surprised that there wasn't more movement in the class with the kind of timing of some of those announcements?
That there wasn't more movement in as far as the recruits went.
Yeah, just more uncertainty in some of their commitments than there seems to have been.
No, recruiting is such a long process, and if there's a head coaching change, then it tends to really shake things up. But recruits, they see things different than fans do, and I think for fans, the last couple of days have been traumatic, with players going in the portal. Your defensive coordinator leaves. That's of course going to be a big deal if you're a defensive player coming to Nebraska. But those recruits who are committed are hearing from the head coach. They're possibly hearing from their position coach. They're being reassured. And they've picked Nebraska and like settled on Nebraska over a period of months. I mean, look, there's flips all over this sport. Just get on social media over the last few weeks, and it's flip season. That's a real thing. Nebraska's avoided like big hits in that area. You go through the list of Nebraska signees, and there are plenty, who were involved in a flip one way or the other. And there were some who left Nebraska to flip, but like there wasn't a ton of drama, as you guys know, late in this thing with players jumping off or jumping on. And, that just speaks to the way that Matt Rhule went about and his staff went about recruiting these guys. Like they didn't, sell them something that all of a sudden wasn't going to be there on December 1st. And I'm not shocked, based in the context of the change that we're seeing, the transitions that we're seeing in the program. I'm not shocked that there was a minimal effect on the recruiting class, as a result of that.
Mitch, with the transfer portal opening up and some of the guys getting in there, obviously there's been, as you mentioned, a little bit of fan fatigue with some of the names that have popped up, and maybe even some surprise from that side. Was this maybe not necessarily the plan for this year's recruitment class, but do you think that there's immediate holes that those transfer portal losses that Nebraska now has to fill with their own transfer portal additions or other guys that they might look for when it comes to today and National Signing Day or the 26 class?
Yeah, Nebraska was always going to have to go into the portal in this offseason. Even with the roster being cut down to 105, and you figure, all right, well, they're looking to trim the roster, not add more to the roster. It's why you see the recruiting class, with Mills now at 20 instead of the 28 or 29 that Nebraska has traditionally signed under Matt Rhule. They knew that they had to be judicious with this class because even with the cut down that has to happen to get to 105, you need to give yourself some room to build things back up through the portal. There will be holes to fill. And this is, again, just another reality in college football. Nebraska hasn't experienced as much turnover in the first 2 years under Rhule as I think we're seeing here this year before the portal's even open for non-graduates. It's already filling up with announcements from Nebraska players that go in some ways beyond what we saw in the last two off seasons. And it's going to continue. There's going to be a lot of names that go in, and many of them are going to be players that you would expect that would leave Nebraska in order to get the Huskers to 105. And then there will be quite a few others, or certainly some others that aren't expected, like a James Williams or, a Jamari Butler, Mekhi Bayer. There will be others like that, and they're going to have to go to the portal for sure. They already were, and now even more so to fill some of those holes. And Nebraska's in a good spot with the portal. Like, they're a school that has the resources to be able to recruit out of the portal. At the end of it, you have to be better than where you started. Like, it has to be a net positive, but between players that go in and players that come out for Nebraska here in this portal season.
Mitch, as you go through some of the names of the guys that have entered the portal that maybe either surprised or disappointed fans, how much of it do you think is sort of evaluating, whether it's from the coaches or just themselves, sort of taking inventory of where they're at within their position group, and maybe not just this recruiting class, but some of the young guys? I mean, I think of like a Vincent Shavers and a Willis McGahee that line up with some of those positions of guys that are leaving. How much of it is you kind of look around the room and you're like, okay, if we're cutting this thing down to 105 anyway, there may not be as many snaps for me next year as I would like, even though
I think it goes through the head of some of the players, some of them. I mean, that may have happened with Prince Will Umanmielen. He may have looked at like the way that the snaps were trending for him this year, and that could have been a factor in his decision to go in. He was a freshman All-American. I think the expectation for any freshman All-American coming into their sophomore year is they're going to see an increase in playing time. They're going to become an all-conference candidate. They're going to be a starter throughout the season. And that was not the way that it went for Prince Will in his second season in the program. So specifically with him, yeah, I could see that being part of the decision. That's not applicable to everyone. It's not applicable to Jamari Butler. Is it applicable to Mekhi Bayer? Maybe, but he didn't see a shortage of snaps for the most part here in 24. With James Williams, that one maybe surprises me the most because of the path that he took to get to Lincoln and what the Nebraska program has done for him. But it does become you have to think about yourself first when you get to this point, both in terms of your earning power and your opportunity to play. And I'd be curious to hear from him. And he's somebody that I would love to get the opportunity to talk to. Like, not all of them need to sit down and explain. None of them have to, but like, I don't even know that it would be intensely interesting to hear from all of them about what their decision process was. James Williams would be somebody that I'd be genuinely interested to hear, like, what was the process for you in thinking this thing through that made you decide you were doing this. Now, if we see Terrence Knighton leave and follow Tony White to Florida State, then it becomes a little more clear with Williams, because we've already heard him talk about his relationship with Coach Knighton. But as of now, as of yesterday, Knighton is still there and a part of this coaching staff at Nebraska.
Mitch, kind of on the topic of conversations and revealing comments, how open do you think Matt Rhule will be today? Maybe not just talking about his recruitment class, which is the plan for his press conference, but about the other questions he's going to get asked, likely about some of the transfer portal losses, guys moving on, and maybe the specifics about that.
Well, he'll probably come out at the beginning and have a few comments about the recruiting class, and that might be about it on talking about that group. I mean, it's not that it isn't interesting. It is interesting, and you'd like to hear about Cortez Mills and how Nebraska was able to wrangle him away from OU. You'd like to hear about Dawson Merritt and how Nebraska was able to get him away from Alabama, and the job that some of their coaches who haven't been on the road before as recruiters have had in this recruiting cycle, like Jamar Mosey and Keith Williams. And I think Rhule will find a way to get to all of that. I'd like to hear, we could do 30 minutes with him or more for certain about this recruiting class. But the stuff that's at the top of people's minds today, because of the way this week has gone, is what happened with Tony White. Like, why did he decide to leave after 2 seasons to go to Florida State? Like, kind of thought that he was holding out for a head coaching position. That seemed to be the message a year ago at this time, or 10 months ago. So that's going to be a big topic. He's going to have to address the Holgorsen thing. Like, how big is it for Nebraska this is a positive. How big is it for Nebraska to have locked up Dana Holgorsen? And the stuff about the portal, I think he'll probably have a general, he's not going to throw anybody under the bus, and he'll probably have a general statement, a general answer regarding all of the players that went in the portal. And, I think it'll be a message that he's supportive of those players. And if they want to go, then that's their decision. Like, that's been pretty steady from Matt Rhule. He's not showing any kind of disappointment or anger directed at players in college football today who choose to go in the portal at any point in their careers. So I don't think we're going to get that from him today. But the stuff about the coordinators, it's going to be a big topic. And we could do 2 press conferences. You could do one today about the recruits and one tomorrow about everything else, but it's all going to be mashed into one.
We're talking with Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Mitch, I know you said you do get pretty into the recruiting and the signees here. Do you allow yourself to kind of, I don't know if excited's the right word, but to get kind of optimistic or kind of start to project on certain guys as you walk through them? Is there a guy in this class that you look at, you're like, hey, that's actually a really good fit for Nebraska? That's pretty exciting.
It's hard to project linemen, so I'll kind of stay away from that. And I know they're really excited about Cade Peterzak. I know they're really excited about Hammerbeck from South Dakota, from Juju Marks, or excited about Marks. But it's just hard to project those guys. Like, you don't expect that they're going to play right away in the program. Same thing with like Malcolm Simpson as a defensive lineman. That's like, get them in, let them get their feet on the ground and see what you have. So it's generally easier, I think, to be more optimistic immediately about the skill position guys. And I look at Jamarian Parker, and I think if he had been somebody who like did what Michael Terry did and wait until the end, there would have been way more hype around him as an athlete in this recruiting cycle. But he made up his mind early, and he's got to be a piece that, talking about excited, he's got to be a piece that Dana Holgorsen is excited about being able to plug into that Nebraska offense. Maybe someone who could have an impact at a different position, but somebody who could have an impact like what we saw from Ja'Cory Barney this season. Assuming that it works out. You mentioned Ravi, Jeremiah Jones, waiting. Let's see where that's at. He's a super exciting athlete too, whether he plays on the offensive side or the defensive side of the ball. And Dawson Merritt and Christian Jones, I don't know that Nebraska could have done a lot better in getting a couple of linebackers to come in and fit what they want to do in that room. I mean, are there 2 higher ranked linebackers nationally out there that some teams signed? I'm sure there are. But for Nebraska, I think Dawson Merritt and Christian Jones fit the need, fit the requirement, the desire about as well as any two players at a position as you're going to find on a recruiting class in the Big Ten or nationally.
Mitch, sticking on the defensive side of the ball and on the idea of projecting, have you started to put together a mental list of potential defensive coordinators for Nebraska, or are you kind of more of a wait and see mode?
Well, I want to see what Matt Rhule has to say about it today. It'll be his first time to talk about Tony's departure, and does he have his defensive coordinator on staff? They brought in John Butler in the summer, fully knowing that Butler has in his career plan to be a defensive coordinator at a major college or NFL team. And that doesn't mean that Nebraska's got to hire him or that Nebraska hired him in July with the intention of eventually having him as the successor to Tony White, but it doesn't mean that they didn't. So maybe he's the guy and he coordinates. I'd expect it. Well, unless you're going to go with like Terrence Knighton, unless you're going to go with Rob Dvorak, I would expect that Butler is going to coordinate the defense in the bowl game. Maybe that's an opportunity for him to earn the job. I don't know. It's a little unorthodox. Like you probably want to have your DC decided on something other than that. But I'm just like thinking this through out loud. I mean, Butler's in the conversation for sure. And then if it's not him, it's wide open. Rhule could decide to go with someone that he's comfortable with and has coached with in the past, like Jeff Collins, who's out of a job after Mac Brown at North Carolina got fired. Or you could see him play the game that he did with Tony White, where he found somebody who, had a connection to him way back, but really was just the name that he heard from talking to people out there. Same kind of path that he took to get to Dana Holgorsen. Yeah, there was a little bit of a connection between the two of them. They'd never coached together, though. He just went and tried to find the best offensive coordinator in Holgorsen, even doing it in the middle of a season. So I think that's, if I don't have a stake in it, but I think if I did, that's what I would want to see from Matt Rhule. Get the best defensive coordinator who you can find. Like use the blueprint that you did with Tony White and with Dana Holgorsen, instead of saying, I got this guy on my staff. He's the best one here in Lincoln right now. Let's plug him in.
Mitch, with the team as it is right now, obviously, the bowl game's coming up. Everyone's still got to prepare for their matchup whenever that one is released and whenever the opponent gets announced. But Big Ten teams were released yesterday. 7 Huskers were honorable mention, and I think the big uproar was that Ty Robinson only could get to third team. What could he have done more other than maybe win a couple more games as the Husker program to move up? He's top 10 on both sides. I'm sure you were a bit shocked by that result.
I wasn't shocked because I've seen that happen with Nebraska in the Big Ten, and you added 4 teams to the Big Ten this year. That Oregon had a bunch of players on the first team and second team, and so that there's it's harder. It's almost like making an All-American team. So I wasn't shocked, but I think Ty deserves better. I think Ty was not the 12th, 11th or 12th, whatever it is. The number of players who were put on the teams ahead of him. I don't believe that those players are all better than him or all had better seasons than him. Now I understand that Michigan's got a couple of D linemen who are All-Americans and are first-round picks, and that there are other players out there who are outstanding at that position. So I'm not saying like Ty needed to be the defensive lineman of the year in the Big Ten. Like that's not what I saw, but I saw him as a top 5 or 6 D lineman in the Big Ten this year in watching every team, either in person or in the teams that Nebraska didn't play on TV. Doesn't mean I'm right, but that's just my opinion on it. I do think that he's impacted in a negative way by playing for a team that's not in the college football playoff hunt. Like those teams that everyone is watching. If you're on Indiana this year and they became one of the big stories nationally, like their players are getting the benefit of the doubt, or they're getting, they're getting a boost in these awards in award season, and that's nothing new. Like you see it all the time. If you play for a 6-6 team, you can probably expect to come in a little bit lower than maybe what you deserve.
Mitch, just a couple minutes left here with you. Are you surprised that we haven't, I know Coach Rhule's talked about it, but that we aren't making more about the fact that unlike the last 8 years, Nebraska kind of gets a whole second spring ball worth of practices between now and the bowl game? I mean, you're literally going from 15 in the spring to now 30 between the end of the regular season and spring now. Like, are we paying enough attention to that? Because that seems like, for a staff that wants to be developmental, a pretty big deal.
It's been so much on the back burner because of the Iowa game and the fallout from that. And then, I mean, losing your defensive coordinator 2 days later, like in a normal situation where just like the status quo was reigning, if Nebraska had beaten Iowa, all the coaching staff stays intact, there aren't a bunch of announcements about players going to the portal here in this first week of December, we would be paying more attention, one, to the recruiting class that's signing today, and two, to what you just said, the impact of having extra bowl practices. And some of these recruits can be a part of bowl practices, and we've hardly talked about that too, which is a completely new thing for Nebraska. You never had early enrollees practicing with the team before bowl games. It's a fascinating kind of dynamic that's going to play out to some degree, at least in Lincoln here this month. We'll get to it. Like, we haven't even got a bowl assignment yet, so we don't know when Nebraska is going to play, who it's going to play. That's going to happen on Sunday. When you get to that, then I think a lot of the conversations are going to turn to what's going on with bowl prep and where's Nebraska, how much practice are they going to get? I mean, you can also make too much of that. It is a big deal, and it's a big deal for the young players for sure. But remember, there's going to be 105 guys on the roster next year. How many of them are a part of these bowl practices, or how many of the players who are a part of bowl practices are going to be on the 105 next year? Well, none of the seniors. None of the players who were going to the portal before or after bowl season. Like, there's going to be a lot of new players too. So it's not like everybody on the 2025 team is going to be out there running around. It's like maybe 60%, which is significant. But I don't want to make it out like this is the end all be all, the hurdle that Nebraska has to clear. Getting 12 to 15 practices. This is it. This is what's going to put them over the top. I don't look at it that way, but it's definitely significant, and it's important for all of the players who are coming back.
That's Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Mitch, we appreciate your time as always. We'll talk again soon.
All right. Thanks, guys.